Hello friends, and welcome back to Nini's Sewing Room. And we're continuing our series on sewing absolute basics. So we've got our sewing machine, and today we're going to be talking about stitch length and stitch width. Now on my sewing machine, stitch length is covered by this dial. That is very tiny stitches. And over here are very long stitches. When I'm sewing clothes, I keep it about here. And we'll talk about why in a second. So, panning back to where our needle is. Now I've got my sewing machine right now set on a stitch length of 1 on the machine. And what's going to do is have a lot of stitches. In fact, they're so close together, we can barely tell them apart. Now, if you needed to seam rip all of this, you're going to take a while because you have so many stitches in here. That's a 1. There are some uses for that. Now, I'm going to go all the way up past 4, and we're going to do, this would be more of a basting stitch. As you can see, we have a lot more stitches, or a lot longer the stitches. So that is our basting stitch, and there's a use for that. For general clothes sewing, I keep it about a 3. Which is good enough for when I am needing to remove stitches and use a stitch ripper. It happens when you're sewing clothes. Now for quilting, I would keep it more at a 2, because quite often with quilting, we further cut the fabric. So after you've sewn a seam, sometimes we will cut them into different blocks. And if you've got a smaller stitch length, they will unravel a lot less. Now, the other reason for a low stitch length is if you have a wide stitch width. Now, I don't have a specific stitch width, but I do have a zigzag option. So I've got my wheel of stitches, and a zigzag option is going to make it very wide. If we look at our foot, and then the hole, we have quite a bit of space. It's not just a dot. That means we can zigzag. We'll get it back to our 3, and I'll show you a zigzag stitch. You can see we have made a zigzag. Now, this is all well and good. I really wouldn't sew with a zigzag like that. But where it comes in handy is if you're putting on a patch, and this is going to go really slow. I've got it between the 1 and the 0. We can see that our zigzag is now much closer together. So if you were sewing on like a patch, you could do that. You could use something like this, and you could get either side of the patch. So you would want a wider stitch like a zigzag, but you would want a lower stitch length. So you would get something like this rather than something like that. If you're sewing clothes, there's very little reason to do any seam other than straight. And that is because we ironed. If we iron, we can never get it all the way flat. I'll show you. All right, we're on our zigzag. We're on our normal 3 for our stitch length. We're at our 5/8 seam allowance. All right. We're going to compare this to the same thing on a straight. Our 5/8 seam allowance, our same stitch length. And now I'm going to iron them. Okay, now right here, we're going to iron this open. We're going to iron this side, and we can get a very nice flat seam with our zigzag. Even if we iron it open, we can't get it flat all the way. We would have to iron it to one side in order to get anything close to flat, and that adds bulk. So keep our straight seams when we are sewing. If we are putting on patches, we could do zigzags. And that is about it with stitch length and stitch width. So thank you for stopping by. I hope this answers some questions. If you have any further questions, please leave a comment. If you enjoyed this and it was helpful, like the video, and as always, subscribing really helps the channel out. We do both sewing and cooking skills, and maybe some other things as the world comes up. But, as always, I love you. I believe in you. You can do it. Thanks for stopping by.